daughter's school kept calling to say she was acting out, until I found out she was covering for a friend who had nowhere else safe to go. The calls started about 3 months ago. My daughter Nora, normally an easygoing 8th grader with decent grades, was suddenly being flagged for skipping parts of class, showing up late to lunch, and once, oddly, being found in a supply closet during a period she was supposed to be in gym. Each incident sounded minor individually, but together they painted a picture of a kid clearly struggling with something. I sat her down repeatedly, asking what was going on, whether something at school was bothering her, whether she was having trouble with friends or classes. Every time, she gave vague, deflecting answers, insisting everything was fine, that teachers were overreacting to things that weren't a big deal. The behavior continued, despite our conversations. Extra snacks kept disappearing from our kitchen, more than Nora could reasonably eat, herself, which I initially chalked up to typical teenage appetite before the amount started feeling genuinely excessive. She'd also started asking for extra lunch money some weeks, with explanations that never quite added up cleanly when I asked follow-up questions. I began to worry she might be dealing with some kind of eating issue, or possibly being pressured by peers into giving away her lunch money. I scheduled a meeting with the school counselor, hoping a professional might get further than my direct questioning had managed on its own. During that meeting, the counselor mentioned something that shifted my entire understanding. She said Nora had recently been found in an unused classroom during a period she should have been elsewhere, and when questioned by a teacher, had gotten uncharacteristically defensive, almost protective, refusing to explain herself beyond insisting she wasn't doing anything wrong. I went home determined to get real answers rather than accepting deflection again. I sat with Nora quietly, telling her honestly how worried I'd become, how the pattern of secrecy was starting to frighten me more than whatever she might actually be hiding from me. She broke down crying almost immediately, and what came out over the next hour completely reframed everything. Her friend Talia had been dealing with a genuinely unsafe situation at home, unstable housing, unreliable access to food, sometimes staying with relatives who couldn't consistently support her, sometimes essentially left to fend for herself, for stretches that Nora had only gradually pieced together over recent months. Nora had been quietly bringing extra food from home, using extra lunch money to buy Talia meals at school, and letting her hide in that unused classroom during free periods, when Talia genuinely had nowhere safe or comfortable to be. She'd kept it entirely secret, terrified that involving adults would somehow make things worse, or that Talia would feel embarrassed if her situation became known to anyone. I felt a wave of complicated emotions hearing this, worry over how long my daughter had been quietly carrying this responsibility alone, but also overwhelming pride in her instinct to protect a friend, rather than looking away from someone struggling. I told Nora gently that this wasn't something she should have to handle by herself, that Talia needed actual adult support, not just a friend's quiet loyalty stretched thin trying to fill gaps she couldn't realistically cover alone. Nora was hesitant, still protective, but eventually agreed to let me help properly. I contacted the school counselor the next morning, explaining everything Nora had shared with me. The school moved quickly, involving proper support services to assess Talia's living situation, eventually connecting her family with resources, and, after further review, temporary placement with a relative in a genuinely stable home. Nora's acting out stopped entirely once Talia's situation stabilized, since she no longer needed to quietly manage a crisis completely on her own during school hours. The counselor later told me it was actually Nora's persistent, careful covering that first hinted something serious was happening, even before anyone realized what they were truly looking at. Talia comes over sometimes now, properly, through the front door, staying for dinner like any of Nora's other friends. What looked like misbehavior for months turned out to be exactly the kind of quiet loyalty most of us hope our kids are capable of, even when we're the last ones to actually understand what we're seeing right in front of us.